welcome to KitHub STEAM Professional Development for Educators. We're excited to share our expertise and insights with you. And today we are going to go over some fantastic STEAM projects for K through 8. And we're going to discuss the projects we really enjoy and some different resources that you can check out. My name is Tara Brown, and I'm the co-founder of KitHub and also the founder of Los Angeles Makerspace.
I'm Luz Rivas. I'm co-founder of KitHub and also founder of DIY Girls.
And I'm Rebecca Wilkins, the education specialist at KitHub and a former elementary teacher.
All right, so the goals for this video and slide deck are first to develop a better understanding of what hands-on STEAM is, and again, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. We're going to introduce some resources and projects for each subject area, and then we're going to go over the skills that the STEAM students will develop. Okay, let's dig into science. Rebecca, let's go over what life science, physical science, and earth science are.
Yeah, so depending on your state standards, it most likely is separated into different science categories. So we just broke this down to give some project ideas for different types of sciences you might teach. We made a note at the bottom about citizen science because we weren't really sure what category it fit into, but it's something that's really important. I think especially a lot of younger kids get really interested in it because they want to know how to help the earth and how to help animals, and it's something that's really important to them. So we made sure to include some resources for that too.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, that really applies to the real world, right? When you get out there and you get to actually use science in the real world, I think that kids all of a sudden understand better, you know, what that stuff they're learning out of textbooks actually will do in real life.
Yeah, and I think science is one of the STEAM subjects that's kind of easier to think of hands-on projects for. You know, we dissect things in life science. We make things with simple machines in physical science. I think that sometimes teachers rely on textbooks just because they're there when they could be doing hands-on projects, but for the most part, there are lots of ideas for science STEAM projects out there.
Yeah, and I think it's important, to let kids know that science doesn't just happen in a lab, right? It could happen in your backyard, in your home, and that's what's great about citizen science and some of these other projects is that it's not just a lab experiment, which is what, when you're younger, you normally think of science, right? Of wearing a lab coat and goggles.
Yeah, okay, but goggles are cute to wear.
Yeah, they are. It's fun. You can still wear them with these other projects. But science happens in a lot of different places.
And I wanted to point out especially too on this, something that I didn't always think about is integrating science with technology, especially these resources for earth science that I put here. I think that, especially when we're talking about the earth science, there are so many online resources that maybe sometimes people don't think about, like using Google Earth, being able to zoom in on a canyon and show kids what it looks like. That's a really cool resource that we have available.
Oh, I wanted to touch on that for a second. Recently I visited YouTube, and they were showing us the Google Cardboard and their Google 360, and how kids, all over the world, that have been given Google Cardboard, especially in remote areas where maybe they don't get to explore outside their neighborhood or town, they were all of a sudden able to explore what it might be to be underwater or in a different city, and it just bringing a whole new perspective because they could all of a sudden, see what an entire room looks like, or spin around and feel like they're really immersed in that environment that they're in. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more of the 360 videos that are coming out.
Yeah, and then sometimes just simple YouTube videos, just Sometimes that's the simplest way to explain a concept, is turning on a video that's 5 or 10 minutes long to tell kids how something works before you dive into the hands-on project.
With the owl pellets, I know some different homeschool parents that have been doing that with their kids, and it wasn't something that I did. I remember I had to dissect I think it was a cow's eyeball. I don't know if I'm still doing that. It was kind of gross. The owl pellets sound interesting though. That's when the kids are discovering like bones and different things that the owl have eaten, right?
And there's so many great literature connections with dissecting owl pellets too. That's why I love that project.
All right. Well, I'm also very interested in the playing periodic table battleship. That's not something that I'm familiar with, but definitely familiar with battleships. I think when you can pair something that, like a game to, learning, I think that that's really clever.
Yeah, it's just playing off of kids' interests to get them interested in what you're trying to teach them.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's move on to T for technology. My background is in software development, and so I spend a lot of time looking for different resources to learn about tech, and that can, right now the most popular subject in technology is learning how to code or programming, but technology also incorporates a lot of other subject areas too. It can incorporate from everything from prototyping to design to other areas, but we'll focus on coding for the most part here. If you're watching this, in November, coming up into December, December 7th to the 13th is Hour of Code, and I think around the world people are participating in this amazing week-long Hour of Code is to learn how to code and provide different resources, whether you're participating online or you're in a school or an after-school program. This is the time to get involved if you haven't already. So if you go to hourofcode.com, you'll see all the different events that are happening for that week. Scratch is a favorite. Scratch is developed by the Lifelong Kindergarten group at the MIT Media Lab, and it's a free visual programming environment for kids to learn. And they also have Scratch Junior now, which is for the younger kids. I believe it's like 4, 5 to 7 years old is the Scratch Junior, and the kids can participate in that on their tablet. But regular Scratch is available pretty much, I think, in any browser. And they also have these amazing Scratch EDU resources so that you can incorporate Scratch into the classroom or after-school program. I highly recommend that. And there's other ones that have developed outside of that too, like I think Hopscotch is very similar programming, a visual programming environment. There's also one now for Arduino. Some of the ones that you're going to see on Hour of Code are going to look very familiar because they all take Scratch and theme it around things like Star Wars or Frozen or some of these other sort of more pop culture type experiences for kids. Mozilla, the nonprofit arm of Mozilla, they have some free resources as well to learn to code. Thimble is a favorite of mine because you'll learn everything from HTML to CSS and JavaScript, and it's really good for kids and even adults to learn. Lucy, you want to talk about Makey Makey?
Sure. So Makey Makey is a circuit board that you can use to be like an interface between something you make, like something physical that you make, to your computer. So it allows you to control, your computer with something, something you make out of, craft materials, food like bananas, and it's just a fun way for kids and adults, of course, too, to make something that. And something more interactive, right? It's like a very cool invention kit, I think.
Yeah, and actually that one also you can use it with Scratch. So there's, if you some different programs in Scratch, like there's keyboards and whatnot, you can hook it up and then directly to Scratch. And also you can play Minecraft. So there's some kids that'll hook up, their Minecraft sword with their Makey and then control Steve or whatever their character is in Minecraft with it. So it's a really great way to bridge sort of online and physical spaces.
Yeah, those last three resources, those are ones that I think regular ed teachers might be most familiar with. They're basically just different ways to interact with reading and writing in technology. I think that technology comes to mind for most teachers when they think of STEAM. They think of anything with a screen. Let's use our computer lab. Let's use the smartboard. And instead of writing on pencil and paper, let's open up a Word document and write there. That's what we think of technology and STEAM, but I'm even trying to encourage myself to think deeper, even for younger kids, and try out those coding websites, teaching kids how to code, because I think that's a really important part of STEAM that sometimes gets overlooked because maybe teachers don't know how to do it, or it seems too in-depth for younger children, but there are so many resources out there that make it easy now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these resources listed, what they do is allow kids to create with technology, right? Yeah. To create whatever they want to make with technology, and that's the big difference with what you mentioned earlier, where you're just using technology to write, like opening a Word document and just writing. Yeah. That's not the same to me as that's not what I mean when I think of STEAM, technology and STEAM.
Yeah.
Those are really great resources. And then I think, another popular topic right now is IoT, or Internet of Things. And there's a couple of sites that are free and will allow you to bridge that, being able to control things in your home or your classroom. So I definitely encourage you to check out ifttt.com, and If This Then That. I think it might be called just This Then That now. There's also Zapier.com. So both those will allow you to connect your phone to, say, turning on your Philips light bulb, or something else that's simple. And I think that there are some really powerful applications there also. It's going to be a $1 trillion business, so definitely something that you might want to check out. Okay, let's move on to E for engineering. Luz?
So when we think of engineering, you typically think of bridges and different simple machines. But one way to introduce engineering, besides the projects, is to think about the engineering design process, right? And to make sure that children know that it's a process, right? Because a lot of times with some of these projects listed, it doesn't work the first time, so there is a challenge or something you're trying to accomplish. You have a goal, and then you build a prototype, and then it doesn't work. So you have to reiterate through the process, until you accomplish the goal. And I think a lot of different types of engineers use this, like civil engineers and mechanical, electrical. There's different fields within engineering too, and that's something. It's a good way to introduce this to children while you're doing these projects. I've seen some classrooms where they do a project related to one of the fields and then integrate some career connections to it.
Yeah, I think we were discussing earlier, I think it's really important to bringing those concepts around in an engineering lesson. I think too often teachers do things like the egg drop, and it's just, students are building things, they're using a process, and they're still learning, but to go a little bit further and bring that engineering concept around to what engineers do in their careers, or really driving home some engineering concepts, I think sometimes we miss that in engineering lessons. So I think it's really important to make really well-rounded lessons that delve deeper into those concepts, even if it's maybe not a standard that we're specifically teaching. It's an opportunity to provide kids a context for what real engineers do.
Well, speaking of real engineers, Luce is an electrical engineer. She went to MIT. Luce, what got you interested in engineering and then ultimately going to school for it? Because that's, we get asked a lot, well, how do we engage girls in STEM? And, so I think it would be really interesting to hear, what got you interested enough to want to go to school for it in one of the top engineering schools out there.
Well, for me, it happened very early. I was in 5th grade when I first got introduced to technology and engineering. My teacher had Apple IIe computers in the classroom, and we were programming. And I thought it was just a toy for the classroom. I didn't even know that people did this for a living. I had no idea what these what these careers were, and that they were careers, right? I thought, just like anything you use in the classroom, I thought this computer was just for the classroom activities, right? And so when I realized, like in 6th grade, that it was a career, I thought, well, this is fun. This is, I can't believe you could get paid for this. And so that began my exploration into what is engineering, and I just did a lot of it on my own. And when I got to middle school and high school, I joined anything that was related to engineering and technology. Even if there was very little offered, I still did it because it was something that I knew that I liked based on this early experience. And then, when I got to high school, one of my teachers, my math teacher, was like, you should consider MIT. And I'm like, what's that, right? I didn't even know what that was. And I was already 16. And so when I looked into the school, I'm like, oh, maybe I should try applying there. So it wasn't something that my parents didn't go to college, or I didn't know any engineers, but I just knew that I was interested in it and excited, and it was all due to my teachers and what they were doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, teachers can have an impact.
Yeah, and I love the idea of teachers being informed about all kinds of STEAM careers, because that's really, like you said, you did that project in 5th grade. I think a lot of 5th grade teachers aren't really thinking about preparing their students for careers. They're thinking about, preparing their students for school and how to work in groups and basic school stuff. And we don't think about teaching them about careers they could look forward to, but it's obviously really important.
Yeah, and we don't have to, we get reached out by teachers, or I do, come talk to my kids, you need to do it, right? And I don't think the teacher realizes how powerful they are in doing it, that they don't have to wait for, this super engineer to come to their classroom and talk to their kids about their career. They can be, they're the ones that see the kids every day, right? So you just do it little by little, and not in just one speech by this engineer that comes to visit your class.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because my background is in software development, and my path to getting there was through playing video games, because I became really hooked on Sierra Online games, and the game designer happened to be a woman. And then when I saw there's this woman who was designing video games, all of a sudden it felt like possible to me, because there really wasn't that many women that were, it was mostly that you'd see, men on boxes, for video games or anything to do with coding, right? Like you'd see pictures of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or something like that, and just very few women. So it just all of a sudden felt like it's possible for me to do that. And then as I became more and more hooked, I had to learn how to hook up modems so I could dial into, bulletin board services so I could find cheats for my game, and, just learning more and more along those lines. And a lot of it was actually very much text-based games that I was playing initially, so I had to get good at typing. So everything for me was very, motivation focused on, because I was interested in video games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about integrating with STEAM, because a lot of grade levels have to teach biographies as part of their standards. why not teach biographies about careers, like people that have careers in STEAM? So that way students can find out about different types of people. You don't have to do the classic, famous Americans biography. You can think outside of the box and connect it to STEAM concepts, and it can really impact a student's future.
So interesting. Okay, so let's move on to A for art. So with this one, the art was added to STEM to make it STEAM pretty recently. And so I think it's also a little bit controversial still. But at KitHub, we believe in pairing the creative with the electronics, and it's such a great way to introduce kids to engineering, electronics, and technology, because what kid is not familiar with art projects, right? I think that's one of the first things you probably do as a parent and a teacher. So there's so many different art projects that, I think this is probably the subject area that, like I said, most teachers are familiar with. But I think there's also an opportunity to sort of think outside those normal art projects that you might do. So I think there's a few on the list here that you may not have considered before. Fashion, for example, is one that I love, because fashion technology has become something that's become almost mainstream at this point. I mean, you'll see really interesting fashion tech on the runways now, where they're incorporating, everything from LEDs to breathing dresses to dresses that paint themselves by top designers. I know a lot of girls, little girls, are learning how to design their own fashion pieces now, and so I think it's a great way to also introduce things like how to light up their dress, or how to do some other interesting things that they might not have considered before. And then the other one that I really love is using one of the most popular video games right now, which is Minecraft. You can't walk down the street without 9 or 10-year-old talking about Minecraft, and it's become much more accessible to incorporate into the classroom. And even for kids to play it at home. And with Minecraft, when you're thinking about art, you can think about it from the perspective of, being able to design and build things just out of your imagination, or recreating different landmarks or buildings that you love. It could be a museum, it could be the pyramids, anything really. Pixel art is incredibly popular in Minecraft and can be a lot of fun. So I think it's a great way to, based on different aspects of what interests you in art, you can use it in a game like Minecraft. Are there other ones, Lucy and Rebecca, that you really like?
I just wanted to mention I'm sitting here thinking about my classroom, and we talk a lot about how to get girls interested in STEAM, and I feel like art integration is a really natural way to do that. In my classroom, my girls were always turning their work into art projects and drawing all over it and cutting out little hearts and gluing it to their paper. And I think that if you start with art and build off of STEAM from there, it's a really natural way for girls to progress into STEAM. And I think that's a really great thing to keep in mind.
Yes, I agree. Like, I think day one, if it's something they already know how to do, if they're making, like, for example, an LED pop-up card, you start with the construction paper and, designing the card, right? And then adding in the circuit, the light up part of the card, so they're not right away being presented with something that they don't know how to do, right? They start off with something that, of course, they know how to do. So, but I think another project that I like that integrates art is using conductive paint into projects. There's paint that is conductive, which means electricity will run through it, and it's a fun way. Instead of using wire or copper tape, you can paint a circuit. I've done it on like small canvas, like a small canvas where they can integrate, lights and other electronic components into the painting, or, just on a piece of paper using that.
And art's a really great vehicle to provide novel experiences, because just like you were talking about the conductive paint, making circuits, students might get the idea that that specific type of wire that you're using to create circuits is the only thing that's conductive. It's the only thing that can make the circuit work. But by introducing things like conductive paint, you're teaching them, no, there are lots of things that are conductive. You learn to understand what a conductive material is rather than just assuming wire is the only thing.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and it makes me think of the BotBot or ArtBot. That's one of the most popular first projects at KitHub, are really and a lot of introduction to electronics workshops, specifically at maker spaces and libraries. I mean, the kids will spend as long as they possibly can on decorating their bot, making it as unique as possible. Luce and I did a workshop with some middle school kids, and they didn't want to stop decorating their bot, So it's great for elementary and middle school kids, and even adults. When I recently did a workshop with some adults, they loved decorating it, and I think, the usually use a paper cup or something similar as the body for the bot, and it's this blank canvas, right? You can really go in so many different directions to decorate that thing. It really allows your imagination to go wild. It's just something that we know works really well. Okay, so let's move on to M for math. And this one, ladies, you're going to have to talk about.
Yeah, math is another one of those things like science. It's one of our core subjects. Teachers, especially primary teachers, are really used to introducing concepts with manipulatives, doing hands-on things for math, but we included some ideas and resources here to kind of extend that thinking, especially that my favorite resource here is that book, 50 Hands-On Projects for grades 5 through 8, because we're taught as teachers that we need to introduce new math concepts with manipulatives, but we kind of let those go in the middle school grades, and we don't let students do as many hands-on projects for math anymore. But they're still learning those new concepts. They're still kids. They still want to do things that are hands-on. So I think it's helpful to remember that, especially for the older elementary and middle school grades.
Well, and also I think that would help sort of sustain interest. I mean, I absolutely loved math in elementary school, and then, when I got to high school, it wasn't as interesting to me anymore, because it was all of a sudden not very fun, right? So I always wonder, how can we keep math fun and engaging? And it seems to me that the more hands-on you can be, the more that you'd be into it, right?
Yeah.
It's also important, like, applications of it. I think a lot of times you're just learning, the mechanics of it and how to solve something, but not, what is this used in?
Those real-world connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think too, math is the whole theme of STEAM is integration. The point of STEAM is to connect these subjects together and make it make sense to kids. And math is something that's another one of those subjects that's pretty easy to integrate with. I used to start out some of my math lessons with a whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard game, or we call them smartboard, to practice our math skills. Or I would introduce a concept with a quick video on the big screen. Just different ways to get kids used to using technology. It's, again, not a real in-depth use of technology, but it's still important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I think we've covered all the letters, and now stream. So this one's interesting because we were recently at the California STEM Symposium in Anaheim, and there was a school there. They had a booth, and the kids had T-shirts on that said STREAM, and their R stood for research. So, but we've seen other R stand for a bunch of other things too. So in this case, we're thinking, and honestly, like in our case, we're talking about reading. And when I saw STREAM on their T-shirts, the first thing I thought was R was for reading. So, so in this case, Rebecca, what are some opportunities for us to include reading, which could actually mean research too, into your STEAM curriculum?
Yeah, research is definitely one of the things that I think about when integrating with STEAM. But you know, I think especially for primary grades, something that I always had a hard time with was integrating writing. For those younger students especially, sometimes it's kind of a chore to integrate writing, especially expository writing and nonfiction reading. It's just stuff that tends to be on the more boring side for students, and integrating those things with STEAM makes them interesting. Like we were talking about earlier, just like doing a project and writing a how-to for it. Lucy, you were telling me that you did that at a workshop recently?
No, a teacher suggested it to me. You know, I did a recent professional development for teachers, and I asked the teachers, how would you integrate this into something you already do in the classroom? And most of the teachers were elementary school teachers. So one of them said, I would integrate this into writing, the writing period. And he said, you know, he would have them create the bot, you know, the little art bot, and then give them a writing prompt, a how-to writing prompt, so that they can write the steps to teach someone else how to build it. You know, and I thought that was such a great idea, because then the kids already have that immediate experience. They all made it, and then they're motivated to teach someone else how to do it. Because the teacher said that normally, you know, the how-to prompt, they just can't think of something, you know, to write about.
Yeah, and the NSTA has a whole bunch of resources that I always looked through when I was teaching any kind of science or math concept, because they have a huge list of science trade books that, especially for the younger grades, you know, I would start out reading a story to kind of make a literature connection before we got started. I think it's really, really important to, especially in the younger grades, incorporate reading and writing wherever possible.
Or even magazines like Make, and, you know, magazines, the how-to magazines for projects that give you project ideas.
Yeah, those would be especially great for middle schoolers, just to kind of get naturally interested in reading nonfiction.
And I recommend the National Writing Project as a resource. They're really fantastic, and they've been thinking about different ways to engage students in reading and writing through other subjects as well. And I remember, again, when we were at the California STEM Symposium, and we had some English teachers come by, and they saw some of the electronics projects we had, and, you know, initially they thought, well, this was not for them. But then when we showed them things like notebook hacking and how students might be able to write how-tos, document things that they made, then all of a sudden I think it really clicked for them how they could sort of close that gap between technology and engineering and their subject matter. So I think that that's where there's lots of great examples now out there about how teachers are doing that in platforms, environments that they might not otherwise have done before, which I'm really excited about. Okay. So here's some quotes on STEAM skills. From STEM offers a chance for students to make sense of the world rather than learn isolated bits and pieces of phenomena. I think we covered that in some of our conversation today. And of course, adding the arts into it, I think, is really exciting, and just, I don't know, I love how it opens up imagination and critical thinking and problem solving in ways that maybe kids weren't doing before.
Yeah, and if there's anything that I hope that teachers can get some insight into today, it's just how important it is to integrate with STEAM. All these quotes to me are saying that STEAM provides, a more in-depth look at what you're already learning. It helps with higher order thinking. It encourages that deeper learning that we're so often trying to get students to reach. I think it's really important that whatever we're thinking to kind of try to give a second thought to these resources and see if we can integrate them somehow.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to say hi before we turn off our broadcast. Oh, there's Luz. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Tara.
Luz.
I'm Rebecca.
And please share any thoughts or comments or questions with us in the comments below, or feel free to email us hello@kithub.cc, or we're on Twitter @kithub. So thank you and see you soon.